Today, it's my pleasure to be speaking with Patrick Cortesi, the chairman of the McLean County Democrats. This episode is going to be extremely interesting, I'm sure, and I can't wait to dive in. But before we kick things off, if you enjoy this episode, please like it, share it, comment on it, and be sure to follow my pages on Instagram, Facebook, and subscribe to my page on YouTube. If you want to support the show, you can donate on Venmo to username The Paul Garcia Show, and or become a patron on patreon.com/Paul Garcia, where you'll get early access to each and every episode just like this one for as little as $1 a month. Now, with all that said, Patrick Cortesi, thank you very much for coming on to the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really glad for the opportunity.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all mine. So let's start things off with this question. Do you think, Republicans, Democrats, given all their differences in what they believe, their philosophies, their ways of going about things, do you believe that they are both genuinely trying to bring about what they believe is the best well-being of the country?
Yes. In a short answer, yes. For the most part, most of the people in both of those parties generally want the best for their communities and probably have very differing opinions of how to get there, but I think they're both after the same end result.
Well, that's what I like to hear. That's a good way to start this thing off. So it's not, nope, Democrats, Republicans, they're actually evil. They're actually trying to destroy the country. And it's strange for me to hear that. I hear it from both sides. Granted, I come from Fairbury, Illinois. It's more conservative, more right. But I hear people say, like, they want to destroy the country. It's like, I don't think anyone wants to destroy the country. You know what I mean?
Right. I do think there are... I think politics in general have become incredibly polarized in recent years. And we can probably have a whole conversation about how and why that happened. But to your point, I don't know that anybody is truly evil when it comes to politics.
Mm-hmm. For the most part.
Right.
I doubt, yeah.
Right. I mean, there are a few folks that are probably a little far to the extreme, but yeah.
And real quick, before we go on, I'm going to ask you to move that mic 1 inch closer, just because it'll sound, there we go.
Sorry.
Now we're talking. No, you're perfectly fine. Okay, so where would you say that you lie, Patrick, on the spectrum of, political ideologies from the right to the left? How would you explain where you lie?
I consider myself a pragmatic progressive.
Okay, what's that mean exactly?
That I tend to lead a little to the left, but I believe in common sense solutions to everyday problems.
Okay, common sense solutions. I'm going to kind of put you in a little bit of a hot spot here, but...
Figures is going to happen sooner or later.
Right, well, what does that mean? Like, which ideas would you say are too radical? And this is a very broad, question here, but which ideas on the left within Democrats are maybe a little too far for you? You said common sense. Are there certain ideas that go beyond what your common sense would permit?
I don't know that there are any that go beyond what I'd be willing to consider. I just think the best path forward most of the time is somewhere you need buy-in from everybody involved, right? So at some point you got to give a little to get a little.
Right.
And so I think one of my talents in what I do is the ability to find those solutions, to find those areas where a wide variety of people can agree on a same solution.
Why do you think, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm seeing it wrong, but it seems like in Congress there's a real desire almost to not agree, it seems like. It's strange. It seems like they don't want to talk and come to a common ground. It seems like maybe too much mudslinging, in my very humble opinion. What do you think of that? Is that true? Am I seeing it somewhat correctly?
No, I think you're right on that. And I think we were talking before about that our politics have become incredibly polarized. And I think it's because we have representatives now on all levels of government or involved in politics that are more involved or more, the phrase I like to use is performative politics. They're more interested in getting their YouTubes or TikToks or videos or getting online somewhere and making a name for themselves that way, as opposed to actually doing the job they're there to be doing, which is to find a better way forward to fix problems that affect everyday citizens.
So you could almost say a little to push their own personal agendas in terms of fame, or maybe they want to be an author of some sort later on. What do you think the reasoning for putting those things that are as trivial as TikToks and YouTube ahead of the job they're supposed to be doing?
I don't know, because I think each person, each individual would have their own reasons for why they're doing it. I don't think necessarily wanting to write a book about your experience is a bad thing. I don't want to lump that in with what I'm talking about.
Right. My apologies. That was me.
But yeah, it just feels like there are some folks on various levels of government that are more interested in the notoriety, in getting the website hits or whatever, than actually doing the job.
Right. Understood. Now, I want to learn a little more about you before we continue on. What can you remember about your upbringing from a political perspective?
In terms of like how I grew up, how I got interested in politics, like, that kind of thing.
What was the household political climate like?
Sure.
Who were some of your biggest influences when it came to that stuff?
Okay.
If you can remember.
Yeah. So probably my mom would be my biggest political influence as a child. She was a progressive. She was a rabble-rouser. We grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, but she grew up in the city, in a rough neighborhood. And so her politics were shaped by the people she was with, who were helping her. She was a foster child. She grew up on the streets. And so a lot of her experiences shaped her political views. And they were pretty much, I would have to say, passed on to myself. So my mom protested at the 1968 convention. She worked for Bobby Kennedy's campaign. She marched with Dr. King.
Whoa.
So those experiences, as she relayed them to me, influenced how I started seeing politics. And I remember being interested at a very young age. I remember the 1976 presidential election was the first one I remember. So that was Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford and so on and so forth. And always seemed to gravitate towards the Democratic candidates because they seemed to be speaking my language. They seemed to be talking about values and principles that just clicked within me. And as I became older and could do my own research and explore what some of the different avenues were, I found myself siding with the Democrats time and time again.
And speak about those values and principles that you said clicked with you, and maybe that also clicked with your mom. Actually, before I ask that, you said
Sure.
that your mom marched with MLK. Is that right?
Yeah, in Chicago.
Actually in his march, like with him present?
Well, yeah, he was there. He would do rallies and speeches at some points, and usually would do some sort of a small march, whatever city he was in.
Wow, that's extraordinary. I just want to make sure I heard that right. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so you said some values and principles laid out by the Democrats when you were growing up really resonated with you. Which ones might those be?
The idea that government should be for the people and by the people and of the people. And the government should really reflect the community that they're representing. So no matter what level we're talking about, city government, state, federal, whatever, that government should really look like and be representative of the community where they're at. So that was important to me. A sense of empathy, a sense of when we all do well, we all do well. I think always kind of struck with me.
Mm-hmm. That is definitely, from how I see it, a pillar of the Democratic philosophy is that they're big on equality. You know, no one, they believe that no one should be not left to die, but, well, of course that, but also no one should really, maybe you can put it in better terms than me. What do Democrats believe about equality? And when it comes to the lowest of the low people, speak about the equality pillar of the Democrats?
Well, we Democrats at their core feel that government and our community is there to help the least of us, right? So if there's a big, what's the word I want to use, gap between the most and the least, that usually doesn't portend well for a successful community. So when we're able to narrow that gap and bring everybody a little closer together on a few different levels, I think we all would do better.
And how does that manifest? What policies are Democratic policies that have, fared well in history's past? I mean, in the United States, in Illinois maybe, what are some policies made by Democrats that have really been a good thing, would you say?
Oh, that's a really good question. There have been a few. It's hard to think of any one specific.
It is it's like a question that sounds easy, but it's like, now name them. Name
right,
policies.
right.
Yeah,
exactly. I don't know that I could name a specific law or policy, but I would look at things like the Equal Rights Amendment that Democrats have been trying to pass forever to make sure that women are considered truly equal. The Voting Rights Act would be a Democratic principle that truly tried to make and bring equality to make sure that everybody had the same right to vote.
Mm-hmm. And what about things like Medicare and Medicaid? Are those Democratic policies? I've heard that they were, and those are things that I really kind of like, especially Medicare, which is for the elderly, correct?
Right. I don't know if they're strictly Democratic policies.
That person who told me that's a liar then. Darn it.
They may be. I'm trying to remember, and honestly, I don't recall under what administration or what Congress that developed under. But I think the fact that Democrats feel that health care is a right, not an option, would be something that would separate us maybe from some conservative folks who think that health care is for the folks who could afford it.
Okay, so what is the Democratic belief on things like healthcare? Healthcare, you hear it all the time when it comes time for debates at the state level. Heck, well, not really at the local level necessarily, but state level, national level, people are talking about healthcare all the time. Mm-hmm. What is the difference, would you say, in simple terms, between Republicans and Democrats when it comes to healthcare and when it comes to paying for medical expenses for people?
Right. So, like I said, Democrats tend to think of healthcare as a right. So we feel we're responsible for making sure everybody has equal access to it and the same level of care, no matter your income level, no matter what your situation may be.
Okay, understood. And I kind of want to talk about some issues at different levels of government, and we might as well start small. Here in McLean County, you're the chairman of the McLean County Democrats. Right. Congratulations. I feel like it wasn't that a recent appointment or something?
It's been a little over a year. I won the election a year ago, January.
Okay, well, time's been flying recently. Time's been kind of a weird thing, given COVID and everything like that. But so you're the chairman of the McLean County Democrats. Mm-hmm. I recently heard a story on the radio about I don't know who it was, some people filed a complaint or an objection to some of the Republicans who are running for positions on the McLean County board for not having new numbers on the list of people who have signed their petitions for them to run for the McLean County board. I think some names are like, I know Hannah Blumenshine. She's been on the show before, among a few others. Was that a big deal? Is that a black eye for the Democrats that are running against them? Or, I haven't been following it, so you go ahead.
I'm curious, why would you, the black eye, I don't understand what you mean by that.
Like I said, I have no idea who filed these complaints. I didn't know I figured it would be Democrat people, maybe Democratic people running, but I guess the people who filed that lost, and I didn't know, maybe is that a bad look?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
So what that was, there were 5 citizens in each of those districts that had an opportunity to look over the petitions of all the candidates. Usually they would have to file with the clerk or ask the clerk for a copy of those petitions. But there was a local blogger who posted it on her website, so it was very easy to download them all and go through them all. And they discovered there was some errors in some of those petitions. And then once they discovered that the petition sheet, so like where you sign, none of those pages were numbered. Seems maybe trivial at first, but it's actually a law that you have to number those pages. It's written in state statute, and not doing it is considered to be a fatal flaw when you're filing your petitions. So they notified the clerk and petitioned the clerk then and filed objections to those petitions and asked that the candidates that had made that mistake be thrown off the ballot as prescribed by law to do so. So the committee was made up of 3 of the local McLean County government officials. They heard the evidence and testimony and decided that they didn't think it was enough of a problem to throw them off the ballot. There was some recourse for the people who filed their objections. This week they filed in the court, in McLean County Court. So a judge will hear the case and hear the same testimony and see the evidence and make the determination, since this is a thing that we're talking about dealing with the law, a state statute, not somebody's opinion on what they think of the candidates or the job they did in submitting their petitions.
Understood. And it's like, don't for one second think that if it was the other way around, if the Democrats had forgotten to put numbers on their petitions, as if the Republicans wouldn't do the same thing.
Right.
Like, hey, that's the rules. They broke the rules. Like anyone would do that.
Well, yeah, and that's part of what's happening with this. I think these folks wanted to make sure and show that nobody was above the law. So I know a few of the people that made that error are incumbents, and you would think, that they've been through this process before. So they just wanted to show that we got to be fair about how we do those things.
Okay. Are incumbents just for, so I understand, people returning to run again for a
Right.
position, an office?
Correct.
Okay.
So, and the other thing I'll say about that, and the reason that is in the state statute, the reason this is a state law, is it is designed to prevent any possible fraud. So I know that's a big issue, especially with some of my conservative friends, right?
Of course,
We're all worried about election fraud. This is one of the ways the state designed their laws to prevent that. So by numbering the signature pages, it would prevent someone from submitting an extra page of signatures later on or after the fact, right? If they're all numbered and signed and witnessed by a notary, you couldn't do that, slip in an extra sheet of signatures. Mm-hmm. Or if you wanted to challenge the actual signatures, you need to be able to reference it. You need to say the third signature on page 3 looks shady. Well, if you don't have page 3, how do you do that?
That's a good point. That's a great point.
So again, there's a reason for the law. There's a reason for the objections. And, we hear a lot about honoring the will of the voters. Well, these particular voters wanted to do this. And so I would support their efforts.
Well, I tell you what, that was a bit of a mic drop moment right there. There's going to be probably a lot of Republicans watching this, and you know what? You articulated your points very well, so I appreciate that. And,
no problem.
And I have a lot more questions, actually.
Yeah.
But before we continue on, let's take a quick break to say thank you to one of this show's beloved sponsors, Fairbury Furniture, which is Central Illinois' premier furniture store. Here's a quick word from them.
Fairbury Furniture is Central Illinois' premier furniture store. This family-owned business offers a vast selection of premium furniture items from all of your favorite brands, including Sealy, Best Home Furnishings, Leather Italia, Tempur-Pedic, and Ashley, just to name a few. Also inside Fairbury Furniture is the popular WC Market, a beloved shop that offers an ever-changing selection of unique gifts and fashionable home decor. So make your home interior beautiful, comfortable, stylish, and delightful when you shop at at Fairbury's own Fairbury Furniture.
Come on down to Fairbury Furniture, where the furniture rocks.
All right, that was Fairbury Furniture, Central Illinois' premier furniture store. And we were just talking about some issues at the local level concerning the McLean County Board and things like that. One more thing about the McLean County Board, it seems like right now, if from what I last saw, it seems like there are 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats on that board. What happens if the Democrats get the majority in the McLean County Board, you know? We always hear about people talking about the majority at the national level, at the federal level. What happens right here in McLean County if that happens?
Well, first, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to correct you. There's 20 county board members, so it's 11 to 9 Republican to Democrat currently, as we sit today. And yeah, that's our goal as Democrats, is to take the majority of the county board. And I would say in a general sense, whether we're talking about our local county board or other levels of government, taking the majority allows you to do some things to prioritize, say, how you spend taxpayer dollars in such a way that is a little more in line with our values and beliefs as opposed to some of our conservative friends.
And what would that look like? You know, what are some things that you would vouch for or support the Democrats on the board that maybe the Republicans wouldn't?
I think a focus for us as Democrats would be to possibly increase some spending on mental health initiatives in this county. I know the current board has done a pretty good job and come up with some interesting plans, but I don't know that they've really been done to the level that Democrats would rather see it. I think if Democrats had majority of the board, we would want to see a little more spending on some green energy initiatives, things dealing with the environment and how the county could have a better impact on the way we're treating our properties.
And just, I know I'm asking a lot of you to know right off the top of your head here, but what would some of those mental health initiatives look like? Like, what specific things have Democrats in McLean County thrown around saying this would be a good way to spend our money, this specific project?
I think you'd almost have to ask some of the individual members, but some of the ideas I've heard them talk about, I think especially involves some criminal justice issues, ways to help some of the folks that are found themselves in trouble. Sometimes that could be either headed off before it gets to the point where we're looking at jail time. Perhaps there's some mental health things that you can do to get them in the right place, to get them off that path they seem to be on. I think that's one aspect of it. I think, this pandemic's been tough on lots of people, right? And it's not only physically, not only financially, but mentally. It's been a big drain on people. And I think our local mental health providers and professionals, they're telling me, they're booked beyond belief. They can't possibly take in all the appointments that people want. So we as a county and as a community ought to be trying to find ways to provide that kind of help for the people in our towns and in McLean County.
Hey, it's hard to object to that idea, but right? How do you do that? I've heard a lot of talk about social services, but at the end of the day, a lot of people aren't mental health professionals, because the mental health professionals, the true practitioners, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, child therapists, they're booked, as you said. They're really booked, closed for the most part. How do we help then the people that are in need with mental health issues?
Well, lucky for us, we have a couple mental health professionals who are running for McLean County Board. So we would look to them for their expert advice.
Name them. Who do you know who they are?
Well, Elizabeth Johnston, who's a current county board member and running for re-election. She's a mental health professional. Faye Freeman Smith is running in District 3 for the McLean County Board. She's a mental health professional. Brandy Elmore in District 9 is a mental health professional. So I would rely on their best advice on how we as a county can best serve the people in terms of providing them the help that they need.
Mm-hmm. It's so tricky, though, at least from where I see it. It's like you're making it very clear. You're painting the picture very well of Democrats are the side of empathy. You know, the well-being, the mental health of these people. They're loving, no person left behind. You know, no one falls. If the government can, help the people as much as it can, especially those in need. That's very touching, and it's interesting for a lot of people, like Christians. You know, a lot of the times they'll resonate with a lot of that from the perspective of Jesus Christ. You know, he sure helped the poor, but then at the same time, it's like you can be Christian, and that makes things difficult politically because you have to pull from both sides. There's things on both sides. I'm not even trying to ask about that, but there's sometimes this silence or this lack of communication between people that are insistent on spending in the right way and people who are insistent on helping people from a mental health perspective in the ways they need. Do you have any idea how we could fix that? You know, maybe we can spend on this and this will help here. And I don't know. What are your thoughts on what I'm saying?
I think it comes down to an aspect of governing, of politics that, I think I'm pretty good at, but I think most people I know are good at, and that's communicating, right? You've got to be able to have the communication between both parties, between all people. And that's how you arrive at, like we were talking about at the beginning, right? Those common sense solutions. Well, if you're just screaming at each other from 20 feet away, or miles away, or whatever, you're never going to get there because you're never going to hear what the other person really wants, right? You don't know. Their expectations are unclear. And so you're bound to disappoint them no matter what you do or say because you've never heard their expectations. And you've never been able to express yours. So you've got to be able to communicate with people, even if they're from an opposing party, even if they're most of their values or viewpoints may seem different than yours. You've got to be able to express what's important to you and be able to listen and hear what's important to them. And that's how you find, like, there's always a solution somewhere if you're just willing to spend some time and work on it.
Literally, logically, mathematically, there is always a solution somewhere out there floating in the cosmos, in the ether.
Right.
And you can find it, but you're sure as heck not going to find it by not talking to each other.
Exactly. Right. So that's part of the reason. That's what we're doing today, right?
Exactly. That's what we're
right?
doing.
I know politically we're probably not very much in sync, but we're able to have conversations, and hopefully other folks will hear you and I speak and talk and go, you know, I know a lot of my friends and neighbors or people I hang out with online on social media are all this way or all feel that way, but maybe they're, you know, that's not what I need to be hearing. That's not what I need to be paying attention to. Maybe I need to be paying attention to the people who are willing to listen.
Right. And yes, I mean, exactly. That's what we're doing. We're having conversations. We might disagree on a lot of things. That doesn't mean anything about our ability to have a respectful conversation, learn from and listen to one another, truly listen to one another, because I think that's the way forward in every way, shape, anything in society, especially government. I think we should get Republicans and Democrats to sit down at a podcast and put on these headphones, make them sit down and talk for an hour about certain issues.
I pitched that idea.
Did you really?
I was the communications chair for the Democrats for a few years. And at the time, there was a reporter over at WJBC named Sam Wood. And I pitched that idea to him, and he loved it. We just never got it in place. But I suggested a twice a month roundtable, right? Where the Democrats could, their chair, or depending on the topic, could bring an expert, and the Republicans could do the same. And we'd talk for an hour on a topic, healthcare or mental health initiatives, or, you know, how we're going to fix the roads or whatever the case may be. But let's have that conversation. Let's have that rational debate where everybody can hear both sides and then make up their own minds, as opposed to hearing it through a filter that we're seeing now, especially on social media, especially on Facebook and Twitter or whatever you happen to use, right? Lots of folks, I feel, are in their own bubble and are afraid to explore the world outside of it, right? They're almost afraid to hear a viewpoint or an idea that didn't come from somebody they know. Mm-hmm. And I think if more people were willing to do that and would be willing to turn on a different news station once in a while just to hear what the other side's talking about.
Dude, you're firing me up.
Right?
I couldn't agree more. Keep going. I'm sorry I had to pull that out.
All right. It's all right. Anyway, like I said, I pitched the idea and it never went anywhere. But yeah, I think that would be a great idea to do somewhere here in town. Once a month, get some folks from both parties and give them a topic to talk about.
Hey, to anyone listening, I'll do it. Come here. You can use my microphones. I'll just sit here. Maybe I'll ask the questions. Maybe I'll switch to commercial, whatever. I think it's a great idea. I really do.
Yeah, I would totally be on board.
Right on. Well, hey, and you said that there's probably a lot of stuff that we disagree on. We might come from different sides of the aisle, but I don't know. Honestly, one of my favorite things is I have no solidarity with either side of the aisle. Of Republicans, Democrats. I think both sides have a lot of good ideas, and both sides are doing things very wrong in a lot of different ways. I pick and pull from both big time, and I'm not married to one side or the other, and as time goes on, I might drift one way or the other. What do I want to say here? I kind of lost my train of thought, I guess. Darn it, this usually doesn't happen. But so both sides have a lot of these good things, and I listen to both sides, and I think one of my things that I really pride myself on is and it's a weird thing to take pride in, but I really love being proven wrong. Mm-hmm. And so I am inclined to listen to people who really disagree with me, or at least disagree with what I currently believe. And it's a thrill when someone proves me wrong, because then it makes me think, hey, I've been wrong about this my entire life. My life's been kind of good up to now. How much better is it going to be now?
Right.
I think it's healthy to have a good hint
for
of that.
sure. And the ability to think critically, right? To never take anything at its face value, to always do a little more research. Something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. And if something sounds too awful to be true, it usually isn't. Mm-hmm. So that ability, and it sounds like that's what you're able to do, to do a little research, to look into it a little deeper and really find out the facts behind what you're hearing.
Right. And it makes sense also, I just want to say that you think that I'm further right than maybe I am, because I've had a lot of conservative guests on, and it's not for lack of trying to have people. Thank you for being a trailblazer of sorts, though, because I hope to have more conversations with people from the left. I want to unify. Mm-hmm. That's what we need in the world, I think.
It's the only way we're ever truly going to be successful. And I don't know that that's going to happen anytime real soon, but it's a worthy goal to be heading towards.
I agree. And I'm hopeful. I think it'll happen sooner than later. Mm-hmm. And if not, uh-oh. But on that note, here's a quick word from yet another sponsor, the wonderful Ultra Physical Therapy in Lexington, Illinois. You ever had to go to physical therapy or anything?
I have.
What was the injury, if you don't mind me asking?
I've had a few of them. I blew out my knee playing hockey as a kid. That was no fun.
When it comes to knee injuries, there's no better place to go to get better than Ultra Physical Therapy in Lexington, Illinois. Here's a quick word from them.
Newsflash, no one likes being injured or being in pain. And if you're suffering from joint or muscle pain, or recovering from a sports injury or a recent surgery, Ultra Physical Therapy in downtown Lexington, Illinois is here to help. They are a locally owned physical therapy company that can treat everyone from the star cheerleader to the farmer getting ready for harvest, to the professional office worker, to the grandmother who wants to be able to play with her grandchildren. The therapists at Ultra Physical Therapy have a combined 25 years of experience and are trained in cutting-edge interventions, including dry needling, blood flow restriction training, cupping, and the use of massage and joint manipulation. They are also skilled in developing exercise and rehabilitation programs to get you back to doing all the things that you love to do. So free yourself from those aches and pains that are slowing you down, and give them a call at 309-365-2500 to schedule an appointment or just to ask questions.
Come to Ultra Physical Therapy in Lexington, and we'll keep you moving.
All right, that's Ultra Physical Therapy in Lexington, Illinois. Great place, great people. They know what they're doing. They are medical professionals, and they'll get you feeling better. Anyway, so we were talking, Patrick, about some local stuff, local governance issues, and I think it was, very enlightening. I think it was useful. I think people are going to really enjoy it. But let's zoom out and talk about state-level governance a little bit.
Sure.
The current governor of the state of Illinois is J.B. Pritzker. Let me just ask, what are your thoughts on him?
I think he's done a pretty good job, considering the hand he was dealt with when he came in. It's no surprise. Nobody will be shocked for me to hear me say that I thought Bruce Rauner was one of the worst governors we've ever had in this state, and that's saying something.
Could you maybe talk about a little bit why, and
Sure.
then continue with your thoughts on JB?
For Bruce Rauner seemed to want to prove a point and didn't really seem to care about the state as a whole. So he wanted to prove a point that the state's budget was not how he thought it should be in terms of priorities and spending. And to prove that point, he drove us billions and billions of dollars into debt, which we're still climbing our way out of. Now, it wasn't all Bruce Rauner. There are plenty of hands in that pot that caused that to happen. But those 4 years under Bruce Rauner really, really created some financial hardships for this state. And the other big thing for me is, and we haven't touched on this, so I'm a union guy. I belong to a labor union. And Bruce Rauner was dead set on making sure that unions didn't have a place in this state. And that does not.
Real quick, for the younger people
Work
that
with
listen
me.
to this that don't know what a union is, maybe describe what a union is, and then we'll get back to, of course,
Sure.
JB.
So labor unions are a collection or a group of employees, usually at a workplace, that have bonded together so they could collectively bargain for their salaries and benefits. By being part of a bigger group, you have a little more leverage from the employer, and you could, I don't want to say force, but you could use that leverage to benefit yourselves as an employee. It gives them some protections. Sometimes employees without unions would take advantage of their employees, whether how they schedule them, how they pay them, what their workplace environment is like. So unions provide that layer of protection for the employees in that sense. We're kind of seeing this play out at ISU right now. The local ASME union there, which includes, the building crews, grounds and maintenance crews, as well as the food service employees there on campus, are all part of a union. But they're unhappy with the salaries they're making. They're getting paid poverty wages. Their benefits aren't what they should be at this point in their careers, and they're seeing the university spend millions and millions on coaches or new buildings and new gyms and things like that, and they're wondering why they're not getting a little piece of that pie. And I can't say I blame them.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like unions, it sounds a lot like, well, there's strength in numbers. That's kind of the philosophy, the core philosophy.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. So is it a legal thing to become a union? I don't mean to talk about these too much, but is it a strict legal, structural, really official, professional type of thing that you have to do? Because it sounds like a football team, if they all bonded together, they could unionize and say, hey, coach, no more of this, and it would work.
So you say that, yeah. And so professional football players belong to a union. The players' union,
I didn't
right?
know that.
Almost all professional sports athletes belong to a union, and it's exactly it. They've all bonded together. We just saw this happen in baseball, where the baseball owners locked out the baseball players' union because they couldn't agree on a new contract.
So the MLB?
Yeah. So that's why the season was delayed by a week. Spring training was compacted a little bit. But to your point, yeah, strength in numbers, right?
Interesting. Well, thank you for going on that little tangent and
no
explaining
problem.
that to
No
me
problem.
and the audience. But so let's talk about J.B. Pritzker, though. Governor Pritzker, talk about what he's done well. You've talked about what Governor Rauner didn't do well. Mm-hmm. What has J.B. done well?
Well, I think Governor Pritzker has done a really good job of getting our finances back in order. He's got some very talented people working with him, either on his staff or in elected positions. I think Susanna Mendoza is our comptroller, has done an amazing job. She's reduced what used to be a bill backlog, where the state's bills under Governor Rauner just weren't getting paid because we didn't have a budget for 2 years. Right. So when there's no budget, there's no way to write checks.
And the budget is a pile of cash that you can pull from, right? To pay things.
Kind of. Yeah. Right. But without a budget, you couldn't pay your bills. So we had this bill backlog that was, I think, 90 days or 120 days, something like that. So if you're a contractor and you're working with the state, you would submit your invoice and want to get paid, and you wouldn't even think of getting it for 6 months. Right? Nobody could work that way. So there were businesses all around the state that weren't getting paid for the work they were doing for the state under Governor Rauner, right? So one of the first things Governor Pritzker did was get that fixed. And so I know the comptroller just announced that they are now current. It is now like a 10-day. If you submit an invoice, if you're a contractor and you submit an invoice to the state for the work you've done, you will get paid within 10 days.
Wow. Well, that's better than 6 months.
It certainly is. It certainly is. So that's one of the really good things he does. Again, as a Democrat, he's, I think, had spending priorities more in line with our values and beliefs in terms of social services, doing things like that that Democrats would like to see our state tax dollars spent on. It doesn't mean you necessarily take it away from anybody. We're not, I don't want to say that, but with the same pool of money, you want to prioritize it and put it maybe somewhere else, somewhere more in line with what you're thinking it should be spent on. So he's done a good job with that. I think he's done a good job of restoring our reputation a little bit, and I think he's done a good job of making promises and holding us to them, right? He's increased education spending. So that should be important to all the residents of the state. But here's where it might impact some of your more conservative listeners, all right? So we all complain about our taxes. Nobody likes paying taxes. And it's no secret that Illinois has high property taxes, right? And everybody thinks it's the state that's, setting those tax rates, or it's your county government or your local government, right? And they do. There's aspects of your property taxes that go to those entities. But by far, the biggest portion of your property taxes are education funding the school districts in this state. So the only way to fix that, to put a hold on your property taxes, is for the state to actually spend what they're supposed to be spending to the school districts. Because if they're getting the money from the state like they should be, then they don't have to charge you that money, right? So just hypothetically, a school district, generic school district, needs $100 million to run its schools for a year, right? The state's supposed to give, say, $50 million of that. But because of bad budgeting, and nobody's made it a priority, the state's only given them 30. So they got to make that other 20 somewhere. They need that to work. They need that to run their schools. Well, the only other option is to increase the property tax and get it from the taxpayers directly. So one thing that Governor Pritzker has done a good job of is fix the education funding so that the state is actually paying more to the school districts than they were before. So then the school districts don't have to get that money through direct property tax assessments.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, no, it makes a lot of sense.
So I know, like I said, I know a lot of folks and on both sides of the aisle, right? Nobody likes paying taxes, and we all complain about our high taxes. But one of the ways that Governor Pritzker has been working on it is by providing the appropriate amount of school funding so that the school districts don't have to do that.
Don't have to suck it out of the local people.
Exactly.
Okay. And
I would push back on the suck it out of local people comment, but yeah, I mean, they need it to survive. So.
Right. Okay. Now, is Illinois in debt? I hear that Illinois is in debt all the time.
Sure.
What's it mean for them to be in debt, and how do you get out of debt?
Well, like your household, right? The state has spent more than they've made or have coming in. So they've probably borrowed money to do that, to cover those expenses. So one thing Governor Pritzker has been doing a good job of is reducing that amount, as we're now actually in a surplus. This last budget that the governor presented had I forget the exact total, but it was a couple $2 billion of surplus. We were going to bring in extra revenue. And so he smartly took a large portion of that extra money and paid down previous debt. So if you could reduce that amount, you're reducing the interest rate. Remember, you got to pay interest when you're borrowing money, right? So the less you're having to borrow, you don't even have to pay the interest rates. And you got to build your way back to reducing your debt. I don't know if any state in the country is not in debt somewhere.
I bet a couple are. Some of those weird ones, like maybe Utah.
Sure,
Not that
right?
Utah's too weird, but
right.
Just a guess.
Right. But I think he's done a good job of getting our finances back in order. So we're paying down that debt. One of the biggest areas of debt in the state are the pensions, right? Honestly, for public workers, whether it be teachers or contractors, construction guys, things like that. So it's an obligation that it's in the Illinois Constitution. They have to meet those obligations. They're obligated to pay those pensions to those people. Those are the contracts that
Don't you dare skip out on them either.
those workers, right?
Right.
So they have to pay them, but you need to put yourself in if you've put yourself in debt to cover that expense, you need to take care of the rest so you can do that. And so, again, with this surplus, they're going to be paying back towards some of those pension obligations, some of that pension debt. They've been a little behind in paying what they need to be paying to maintain their obligations.
And just before we go to another commercial here,
Sure.
I want to ask, just so you can play both sides, just
Yeah.
to show that you're not just living in an echo chamber.
Yeah.
What maybe is something that J.B. Pritzker hasn't done well as governor?
I don't.
Or that he could improve upon?
Sure. I know they're working on it. Infrastructure projects, right? I mean, it's a cliche in politics anymore. Fix the damn roads. Yeah, we all want good roads. I get that. But it takes a little doing to get that going. I think that could be improved on. It seems like it's going to be a priority. It seems like it's been increasing a priority, but not to my liking. Not enough to my liking yet.
Have you heard that there is a way to make roads that is cheaper, more long-lasting, more smooth, and it's to recycle tires and use them mixed with something and then make the roads, but then it would lead to those annual, road workers, which provides income for a lot of people that are somewhat in need. If we had those good roads, it would make those jobs obsolete. Have you ever heard that?
I have not. I have not heard that concept.
It's like a documentary on it. I forget what it's called, but it was super fascinating. It's
I'll check it out. It sounds
look
interesting.
Into it maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, anyway, if you don't know about it and I don't know much about it, then we better not talk about it. And we better go to a quick commercial from one of the most beloved stores, places in general in central Illinois, and that is Dave's Supermarket in Fairbury. Have you ever been to Dave's before?
Not that one, no.
Okay, what the? I asked you during the last break and you said you...
I swear there was a Dave's Supermarket here in town. I was at that one.
Well, once you see this commercial, you're going to love it. Dave's Supermarket in Fairbury, Illinois. Everyone loves this place. Check them out.
Since 1950, Dave's Supermarket in Fairbury has been wowing customers throughout central Illinois with their unmatched customer service, delectable deli market, beloved grocery carryout service, and many other fortes, which is why they've earned hundreds of 5-star reviews online. Dave's 3rd Street Deli has plenty of seating and is a destination place to meet your family and friends for good food, fun, and fellowship. Not only is their home-style fried chicken here the best around, but you can also enjoy free coffee and 50-cent ice cream every single day. And be sure to check out their Old World Bakery while you're here, where freshly baked goods are prepared every morning. You'll find hundreds of unique and signature items here at Dave's that you won't find anywhere else, like their famous potato salad, ham loaf, and canned meats, just to name a few. Dave's Supermarket is open Monday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and offers online shopping and curbside services. Come experience this revered location that puts a super in supermarket when you shop at Dave's in Fairbury, Illinois, wowing the customer for over 70 years.
All right, that was Dave's Supermarket, and even though Patrick hasn't been there, if he did, he would love it. You go there for the races, you said, in Fairbury. You got to stop by Dave sometime.
You got to. Man, those ribs look really good.
Oh, they are awesome. They are awesome, and Dave's is great. But anyway, we were just talking about, some of your favorite parts about Governor J.B. Pritzker's leadership in Illinois and some of the things you think he could have improved on. I want to ask a few more things before we zoom out even further to the federal level. But first of all, when it comes to taxes, it seems like the stereotype is that Democrats are the party of higher taxes. You talk about things like social services, mental health initiatives, green energy, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of the times these things cost money. What is the Democratic philosophy on taxation?
Well, like I said before, nobody likes paying taxes, but to the point you just raised, to do these things, they cost money, and so you need to have money to do those things. I think most Democrats would prefer to find that money within, move money around within the system, as opposed to having to bring in any new sources of income, meaning new taxes. But sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. But I don't know that Democrats have that as a philosophy, as we need more or higher taxes. I would disagree with that. I don't think that's a democratic philosophy at all. I think it's trying to do more with what we've got first. But if it's a high enough priority and there's no other solution, then sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Right. You got to do what you got to do. Okay, understood. And thank you for disagreeing with me there. That makes sense, and I understand that completely. I mean, some people on the right would want higher taxes if it meant certain things in their agenda.
And that's what it all boils down to is your priorities, right? We've talked about this a few times, that Democrats, I think, would like to be spending money more in line with our values and beliefs than maybe some of our conservative friends. So, it's you've got the same amount of money, pool of money to work with, but where are you going to spend it on, right? Are you going to spend it on schools and in mental health services, or are you going to spend it on these things? So,
what do you think would be the hottest point of contention between Republicans and Democrats on what our tax dollars should be spent on? Something that Democrats would be like, yes, and something that Republicans would say, heck no. What's that one thing you think that they diverge on so much?
That's a really good question. I would say social services programs, things to help the poor or folks that are struggling right now. I think Democrats generally would like to see more money spent to help them. And I'm not sure always our conservative friends feel that that's a priority.
Understood. Now, I want to ask one more thing about Governor J.B. Pritzker, and it's about in the past couple of years, COVID-19. If you had to give a report card grade, what would you give Governor J.B. Pritzker on his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, the laws, the restrictions, the legislation that he passed, the bills, everything? How would you grade him?
Well, he didn't pass any laws. He's the governor. He can't pass laws. But I would give him a B. Based primarily on the fact that he listened to scientists and experts and followed their advice, and really kept us relatively safe compared to some of the other states definitely around us and some of the other states in the union. I thought he did a pretty good job of keeping our numbers as low as they possibly could be.
Would you acknowledge that some people are upset that they believe that his strict rules put a lot of small businesses out of business? Do you think that's true? And also, before I say that, you said he didn't pass laws because he's the governor and they don't, but he does sign bills
Correct.
that
Yeah.
become laws.
Yeah, he
Okay.
could.
Just making sure I wasn't crazy.
No.
there.
But it's the state legislature that actually drafts and passes the laws that he ends up signing. So
Right.
my point being is he's one person, and he can want a bill as
That's
all
a
he
good-
wants. But if
yeah.
the state legislature isn't in sync with him or doesn't agree with him, it's never going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there have been some things that he's wanted that he can't get anybody in the state house or the state senate to agree on. So it's not going to happen.
Right.
That being said, I don't think his regulations put businesses out of business. I think it may have made things a little more challenging for them. I get that, and I can appreciate that. And, nobody wants, small businesses are the backbone of a community, right? Nobody wants to see them go away. Nobody intends for that to happen. And I think there was a little bit of a learning curve. I think at first he prioritized the people over the businesses, which I think might be in general an area between Democrats and Republicans that might be a difference, prioritizing people over the businesses. But I guarantee you nobody in government on any level wants to see small businesses suffer or close. And I think they did a pretty decent job of kind of bouncing back from that and trying to find ways to help them, once they realized what was happening.
Right. Understood.
With the small business loans or the different programs they had set up to help those businesses.
And I lied. One more question about this stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, the proof of vaccine. A
Yeah.
few states kind of initiated that. What were your thoughts on that? Do you think that was warranted and absolutely or it was necessary? Do you think maybe it was a breach of privacy?
No, I don't think it was a breach of privacy. I completely agree with all the vaccine requirements. It's a pandemic. Hundreds of thousands of people are dying. Millions of people are getting sick. Most, or I shouldn't say most, but many very seriously. And we don't know what the long-term effects of this sickness is going to end up being. So to do what we had to do to help out our community, to make sure that we all were able to get through this, I think it was a requirement.
Understood. Okay, now, as I said, I want to zoom out a little bit to the federal level. First of all, President Joe Biden, right? What do you think as far as how he compares to our former president, President Donald Trump? I know these are two totally different human
Sorry,
beings.
I couldn't help but eye roll. I apologize.
Oh, no, you're fine. Explain, though.
So what was the question? How would I compare Joe Biden to President Trump?
Exactly.
Completely different philosophies on what that job is there for and how it should be done. I will say this, it's my opinion, but I don't think that Donald Trump wanted to be president. I think he wanted to be called president. I think Donald Trump is, some may call him a businessman. I would call him barely so. I think he was using the campaign to become president, for sure, was just trying to monetize it. He was in serious money trouble. He had loans outstanding all over the place, and many of his properties were failing and going deeply into debt. So I think he ran for president with the idea to monetize it. And then he actually got elected and didn't know what to do. And then kept trying to find ways to monetize it. And I think he still is. So that has always rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know that he's ever truly had the best interest of the country at heart in that role.
So just to kind of summarize here, like you do think that his campaigning for president, he might not have expected nor necessarily wanted to win, but he wanted the publicity and the business assistance that such a campaign would bring about for his own personal business endeavors.
By business assistance, meaning he would be able to sell books and sell stuff, right? I think
Make money, yeah.
Yeah, and Donald Trump, I'm trying to think of the right term here. I think of him more like a carnival barker, right? I mean, he's just always trying to sell people on something, whether it's an idea or a product. And we'll give him credit. He's very good at it. I mean, he's made his whole personal career out of doing that, right? He's always been able to sell a brand or an image, especially. He's very talented at that. But I don't know that that's what you want to be a president of our country.
And maybe what can you say about kind of his character when he was in office? Was there anything that really irked you about him?
Again, because I don't think...
Or maybe just how he ran. Maybe I shouldn't just, narrow it down to his character.
I don't like how negative it all got. I don't like the personal attacks. I thought a lot of the way he ran his campaign was unnecessary. I think his campaign brought out the worst in some people. And I don't know how we're going to recover from that. I don't know how long it's going to be before we do. I don't know how we put that genie back into the bottle, because now we have people, and I will admit probably on both sides, that see that as a successful way of campaigning, of running for office. And it's not something I would agree with or want to see.
Like, it's distasteful.
To me, it is, yeah.
And one thing I do want to kind of challenge you on a little bit, just get your thoughts on, by the way, I have no Trump memorabilia. I'm not a Trump fanboy by any means, and my vote will remain secret. But how do I say this? I think a lot of people enjoyed about Trump that he was different, and think of what you want about how he was different and if it was a good or a bad thing. But he didn't seem to be speaking down to people. He didn't have this kind of politician veil over him type of thing. And I think people on the right and the left, I mean, they're so used to people talking in politics speak, talking like a governor, talking like a president. But this person spoke in a way that is similar to how they speak in everyday life. And I think that might have had notes of good things, but I'm curious what you think about that.
I think you're exactly right. That was one of the ways he was able to be successful at that campaign, being able to reach people on their level, right? And really, you should be trying to do that. That's how that works. Any good politician should be able to do that. Again, I just... when there came opportunities, doing that is fine as a politician. Reaching your audience and being able to speak where they're coming from and being able to talk about issues that are important to them in a way that they get you, right, and can relate to you. That's all good. When when sometimes that happened, and some of those people he was reaching responded in a very negative or violent way, there were opportunities for him to take a better path, to explain, hey, that's not right. We can talk about this and I can feel your pain and I can understand your struggles, but that doesn't give you the right to do this, right? And I'm thinking things like Charlottesville, okay? So when he had that opportunity...
maybe for people that aren't immediately familiar with what Charlottesville was, could you explain that? So
Charlottesville, there was a rally of alt-right, right extremists, white supremacists, whatever the mix was. I think the Proud Boys were there too, if I'm not mistaken. That ended up turning very violent. And shortly afterwards, when some arrests were being made, President Trump said that he wouldn't hold anybody responsible, that he was sure there were very fine people on both sides. And I thought that was a real seminal moment in his presidency when he refused to acknowledge what had happened and refused to condemn some of the extremism that then kind of bubbled in our society under his presidency for the rest of his term, and then culminated in the events of January 6th, right? It's the same group. It's the same attitude. It's the same folks that were doing that. And they were never really they were never really, what's the word I want to use? I don't want to say controlled because I don't believe in controlling people, but because they were never dealt with, they felt kind of licensed to keep going.
Because President Donald Trump never addressed their wrongdoing appropriately. They never believed it was a wrongdoing in the first place.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I just want to say, I remember watching, I was like, dang, man, I wish you would just kind of say that they weren't, condemn it. He did later on a less popular show. He did say, I rebuke them. There it is.
Sure. He had that moment at that podium. And that, if he had done that, right, I think the path of his presidency, at least, I don't know, he would have made any different decisions. But I think some folks in our country, in our society, might have made some different decisions. He had a chance to deal with it then, and because he didn't, it progressively got worse.
I can follow that thinking. And one of my favorite questions throughout all the debates leading up to Trump's presidency, between him and Hillary Clinton, one of my favorite questions was, can you both say something nice about each other? Right. And I want to ask you a question. Can you say anything nice about President Trump?
Oh, I was not expecting that one. So let me think of something, because yes, I think I should, and I think I can, although it will be difficult.
You're ruining it.
I'm sorry. I think Donald Trump is a master communicator, knows how to put together an organization that can get the work done. I think he's very skilled and talented at evaluating people's strengths and weaknesses. I do think that. I think he's very insightful that way. Again, those are all skills and talents that could be used for good or for bad, but he possesses them.
Wow. Well, hey, man, there's a reason you're the chair of the McLean County Democrats, because you can think on both sides. That was very well put. And, okay, talking about the presidency, the current office, what are your thoughts on the stimulus checks and, the printing of, I believe it was over $1 trillion. I should know that number off the top of my head. What are your thoughts on that? I know in the area I hear a lot of people saying it wasn't a great move. It led a lot to inflation. What are your thoughts on that? I haven't heard a clear Democrat speak about this.
I don't know that the stimulus checks led to inflation. I think inflation was
or the printing of trillions, I mean.
Yeah. I think it's more, inflation was more due to the supply and demand of goods as opposed to a monetary issue, right? So, and I think the pandemic exaggerated what seemed to be kind of our path that we're heading towards. A little bit of inflation is sometimes a good sign for a recovering economy. It lets you know that things are moving in the right direction, but you've got to be careful and control that. Well, the pandemic took all those controls, all those stopgaps, and just blew them out of the water. Right. And so now we're having supply and demand issues, mainly lots of demand, because you gave people lots of money to spend and they're spending it. Right. They're all over Amazon and buying stuff left and right. But the companies aren't able to make the goods now. So now we have supply chain issues. Now we have way more demand than supply. And I think that is more the issue with the inflation that we're seeing as opposed to overprinting of money.
Would you say that overprinting of money did have an effect, though? It did play a role?
I'm sure it did. I mean, you can't do that and not see any effect. And I wasn't aware of that particular figure, but I'd want to look into that a little more. I mean, I trusted that you researched
you know what?
it.
I could look it up. I might do that in a sec. We'll see. But
it would honestly have some effect. I don't want to totally discount what it would have done, but I think there were plenty of other mitigating factors as well.
Right. That much is true. That is fair. I just want to pull this up because if I just threw out $1 trillion, it was totally wrong.
No, I trust you.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay. the conversation, is this a credible source? Academic rigor, journalistic
I've
flair?
never seen that or read it.
It's definitely not a big one, but Joe Biden's U.S. $1.9 trillion stimulus won't be enough to reignite world economy on its own. So there's a $1.9 trillion. And now President Joe Biden's stimulus package has buried it. I believe that's what I've heard a lot. If it's wrong, it's on me. It's not on you. Everyone just know that. But okay, one more.
I think I understand where you're coming from, and I think in general you're correct. I think our government needs to be more careful about doing that. But I don't know that this specific cause or this specific effect was because of that specific cause. I think there's some other things playing into that.
Right. And it's really impossible to say exactly how much certain things play into a thing because there's no clear calculations to figure out. 19% of this was due to blank.
Right. There's people smarter than you and I that are able to figure that stuff out, and they're sitting in think tanks all over the country, I'm sure. But
that's for sure.
It's beyond my capabilities.
Right. And so what do you think Republicans fail to acknowledge that hinders their ability to govern effectively? It's an open-ended question. It's a big question, but what is something that you think, when you're getting frustrated, you're watching Republicans lead and you're just like, they just don't get it. This is what they need.
That the decisions they're making will affect more people than they realize. That, again, there doesn't always seem to be that sense of empathy that the policies that they're deciding on or laws they're putting into effect will affect more people than they think. And so that gets really frustrating to me.
Understood. Now, we're getting towards the end of this whole darn thing here. I've enjoyed it very much, but I want to ask, for the people who are on the fence about voting Republican or Democrat, because they exist. They're a minority, but they exist.
I don't know that they're as much of a minority as people think. I think it's in our county particularly. I think McLean County has such a wide variety of communities and situations. So, let's remember, McLean County is the largest county in the state in terms of land area, right? So there's a huge variance from the north side to the south end of the county, and then you have a metro area like Bloomington, Normal, right? So it's very representative of what our state looks like, and really, if you think about it, what our country looks like. So I think it's probably about 40-40 Dem Republican, and I think that 20% in the middle can kind of go either way, depending on who's speaking and what they're talking about.
I have an interesting site that I had pulled up. It's called from bestplaces.net, and it shows Bloomington, Illinois is leaning liberal. McLean County, Illinois, this is as of 2020, is leaning liberal. Bloomington metro area which is Bloomington Normal, like you said, is leaning conservative, and Illinois is mostly or moderately liberal. I just thought that was an interesting
That is. And I'm curious what they're basing it. I'm guessing the Bloomington, this was in 2020, you said?
Yes, and it says...
was it because of the municipal elections?
This is about the last presidential election.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because the municipals were... 21. All right. Yeah. Because I was saying, because Bloomington definitely turned more conservative on their city council with the candidates that were elected to city council. So I'm wondering if that played any effect or when that, what the timing of that was.
Yeah. And maybe there's not enough people voting for that.
Well, that's for sure. No matter what, right? No matter what side you're on, I think we could all agree that people in town or in the county need to play a bigger role in their local politics, right? Holy smokes, what did we have? 10%, 12% vote in municipals and city elections last time?
That's tough.
That's insane. I mean, you can't possibly find anybody truly representative of your neighborhood or your precinct or your ward if only 10% of you are showing up to vote.
Right. And for the people who are on the fence now about which way to vote, what would you like them to know heading into the important elections coming up?
Well, I think you need to vote your values. I think you need to vote your conscience. And think you need to honestly listen to all the candidates. and discover which one of them truly speaks to your own personal values and beliefs. And it seems like they're going to align with that, because that's really who you want in office, no matter which way you go. But that's the ideal solution.
Understood. All right. Well, I mean, unless there's something that we didn't talk about, I would say we're getting towards the end here. Is there anything else that you'd like to?
Man, we've covered an awful lot.
We have. I've
done
enjoyed
a pretty
it
good job.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, let me read a quick thing really quick, and then I'll get back to you. But for everyone watching and listening, thanks for listening and watching to the Paul Garcia Show. If you like this episode, subscribe on YouTube, like my page on Facebook, and maybe even follow me on Instagram. But most importantly, share this episode with your friends and family. And if you'd like to support this show, consider becoming a patron on patreon.com/Paul Garcia, or donating on Venmo to username the Paul Garcia. The Paul Garcia Show. Until next Sunday. That's the downside of doing this thing live, you know.
That's all right.
Until next Sunday, I'm your host, Paul Garcia. God bless and have a great week. And Patrick Cortesi, thank you so much for your time today. That was really fun, and I think it was a very meaningful conversation.
Thanks for having me. I had a great time. And if you want to find out more about the Democrats, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or go to our website, McLeanCountyDemocrats.org.
Right on. All right. Well, hey, that's a wrap. And again, thank you. It was an honor.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, by the way, this is what conversations from both sides of the aisle, not that I'm too far that side, gosh darn it, but this is what they look like. And I think we could stand to see more things like this.
I'm all for that.
Right on. All right. Boom.